Hi, my name is Bugsy and I'm at the Cracks. And today I wanted to talk about this neat terrain tile system that I came up with using children's magnet toys. So here's a quick overview of the system. Magnet tiles on the bottom and terrain tiles on top. It's fully modular and you get to change the terrain topping whenever you want to while using the same set of magnet tiles that you already have. This is heavily inspired by the work of RP Archive, a great channel, and so many of the texturing techniques I'll be covering are directly derived from Matt's amazing terrain work. I also want to acknowledge Dickey and Dok Minis, both of whom have covered the topic of using magnet tiles as tabletop terrain systems. I highly recommend visiting all three of those channels if you want to learn more about crafting. The work that they all do is amazing, and they got me wondering about ways to incorporate their ideas into a system where, especially as a beginner crafter, I could try to be more economical about the amount of foam and magnets that I use, and also where I could reuse the magnet tiles instead of permanently altering them. So it took me a few iterations to figure it out, but what I came up with was taking thin sheet metal, galvanized iron in my case, and sticking them to the bottom of XPS foam tiles. These XPS foam tiles I then shape, paint, and finish as terrain, and because of the magnetic sheet metal, they stick directly onto magnet tiles. It also makes it so that any magnetic scattered terrain or minis that I put on the tiles can stick to the terrain. Here are the materials and tools that you'll need. The biggest buy might have to be the Proxon. You can do without it, honestly, but you won't be able to cut your tiles as thin as you need to make scattered terrain magnetically stick to the tile. I'm using Magnet Tiles 100 pieces set. It comes with 50 square tiles, 4 large square tiles, 11 half-square triangles, 20 equilateral triangles, and 15 isosceles triangles. I did get magnet tiles, but other magnet tile systems should work perfectly. And as far as I know, most of them will work with other brands without much issue, so you can mix and match if you'd like. My D&D group is currently adventuring in a dark and dank cave system, so that's what I'll be crafting today. I'm aiming to make 30 square tiles and a complete set of all the triangle tiles that I mentioned. One thing you should know about magnet tiles is that even though they're advertised to be 3 inches by 3 inches, they're actually closer to exactly 75 millimeters by 75 millimeters. So you'll have to cut your terrain toppings accordingly. I have absolutely no problem with that though, because I do think metric is just a much cleaner measurement system to work with in the first place. So let's start with the GI sheet first. You'll want to use thin sheets or they get extremely hard to cut and work with. Mine was 0.4 millimeters in thickness, but you should be able to get away with 0.5. Anything closer to 1 millimeter is almost impossible to cut with shears. You'll also want to double check if your sheet is actually magnetic, because not all sheet metals are. In fact, not even all galvanized steel is magnetic, so you really need to make sure first. Thin snips and shears are great for this, but if you have a paper cutter handy, that makes things a lot faster. Take care to hold your GI sheet in place when using that tiny guillotine, because it tends to slip out from under your grasp sometimes. Paper cutters are great for large sweeping cuts of the GI sheet, but afterwards you're going to want to stick to the thin snips to make sure that your cuts are accurate and precise. And speaking of precision, I stick these printed out templates onto the GI sheet before I cut them to make sure that all of my dimensions are accurate. Be careful to snip off all the sharp corners of the cut up sheets because they can really cause some damage to your fingers if left sharp. We are dealing with metal sheets after all. I use these magnetized rubber sheets to hold all cut up GI sheets in place for the next couple of steps. It just makes my life way easier. Now, moving on to working with the XPS foam. With the Proxon or a box cutter, cut out the shapes you need for the tiles and then slice those shapes into nice 1/16 inch or 1.5 millimeter thick tiles. I find that these are just thin enough that magnetic scatter terrain can stick to the underlying GI sheets with no problem, but still thick enough that you can still work good texture into the foam. When your foam is all sliced up, you can then proceed sticking the GI sheets onto the bottom of these XPS tiles. Normal white glue is fine, but it gets messy and takes a bit longer to dry and cure. Same thing with wood glue, but it's supposedly an even stronger bond. My go-to nowadays is this spray adhesive by 3M, since it's quick and easy and is actually made for foam. I mentioned that because a lot of strong adhesives are bad news for foam and end up dissolving it upon contact. So make sure whatever glue or adhesive that you're using is safe to use for foam. After gluing them all up, the next step is texturing and painting. All the rest of the process is covered by RP Archive in his wonderful cave tiles crafting video, but I'll try to brush up on the steps that I personally used. I used a texture roller to roll in some bumps and crags into the foam, but you can always simply just use a rolled up aluminum foil ball. It works just as well. From there, I proceeded to prime the tiles with a black paint and Mod Podge mix. If your foam is made of less colorful materials than my blue foam here, you could probably skip this step. I let the primer coat dry and started to paint my tiles how I like them. I then started to apply white dry brush highlights as well as some dark brown wash afterwards to make the crags and recesses stand out. The last step involves applying some layers of clear top coat. I usually do one gloss layer since it's supposedly more resilient, and then 2 consecutive layers of clear matte top coat. This is especially important if you know you're going to be using these terrain tiles for some heavy-duty gaming. With all that done, you can now stick your complete terrain toppers onto your magnet tiles and play around with the layout. You can stack tiles on top of each other to create slopes and gradients and introduce levels into your games. And if you want to change out the type of terrain on the tiles, all you really have to do is replace the magnetic terrain toppers. And all that's done. I have a couple more ideas in the works of how to make the system for water tiles, wall tiles, and tile edges, so hopefully I'll get around to trying those out soon. In the meantime though, have fun with the terrain topper system that we covered today. I sincerely hope this system sees a lot of use in the terrain crafting community. If any of you have suggestions that might improve the system, please let me know. Leave some comments if you can, and hopefully I can implement the improvements for the next couple of tiles that I craft. See you all next time!